We have talked a great deal about the implications of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and what it represents in the free speech battleground, where certainly free speech has not existed in a social media era. And I thought last night, leading into this morning, actually told us a tremendous amount. Now, let me explain. I don't know how many of our listeners have watched the Daily Wire What is a Woman documentary that Matt Walsh and company put together. It's a fabulous movie, so well done. There's humor, but more importantly, there's a great deal of real analysis of the transgender movement and what it represents.
There are some very funny moments, too, so they executed it well. Like when Matt asks one of the gender experts, I like scented candles. Like, am I a woman? I mean, there's some good stuff.
Very good. And I watched, they sent a clip out. I think we talked about it maybe like a year ago when this came out. They sent us a screening copy, and I sat down on my phone intending to watch like 5 or 6 minutes of the open just so I would have a sense for what it was like. And I streamed and watched the whole thing on my phone, not even having anticipated. The reason why I bring this up is as we go into the weekend, the Daily Wire decided they wanted this movie to be freely distributed for everyone, and they chose to do it on Twitter because Twitter now allows long-form videos to be shared. Well, Buck, one of the big stories about Elon's battle for free speech at Twitter is there are still a ton of far left-wing employees that are trying to rig the game on Twitter. And I think this is what happened, Buck, with the spaces that Ron DeSantis undertook. I think somebody just pulled a wire. And again, I'm not a tech guy, but when I say pulled a wire, I mean, decided to intentionally bring mayhem and haywire to the group. And the same thing happened yesterday in the evening when they tried to share this video.
I think it's worth everyone noting that even if you're not on Twitter, and I know that overall people listening, a pretty small percentage of you, Clay and I usually guess that maybe 5-10% of our people, meaning all of you listening on radio or podcast or streaming, about 5 to 10% are on Twitter and with any regularity. But Twitter is this very rare, I can't think of another circumstance where you had a place where the worms of the woke virus mind infection had just made their way through every cavity of the brain, right? I mean, the place became a social justice enterprise that was also operating a social media platform. And so when you go from that, it's almost like you're getting to dissect. It's like you're opening up some, you're opening up a snake that has some weird virus or fungus or something that has gone through the entire body, and now you're seeing the full extent of it. And although I don't think reptiles really get infections that way. Side note, who cares? You guys know what I'm saying. And the reality is, Clay, that it was much worse than anyone even out on the outside anticipated. I've been told by highly credible sources that there were individual people working for Twitter who were taking actions with regard to code against individuals, meaning Twitter users, and issues. So this is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is reality. Think about this, everybody. The company had thousands of employees, and if, blue-haired cat lady employee number 634 decided that Clay and Buck are mansplaining too much, she or he or whoever could go on and basically shut down the access that you have to your followers, and no one would even know about it. And there are still leave behinds in the organization. I mean, Elon's come in and they're fighting this woke infection, if you will. Ella Irwin departed. That just happened. This is reporting the Wall Street Journal today. I think she left yesterday. She was the head of trust and safety. And Clay, head of trust and safety is the equivalent at a corporation in America today of the political commissars that the Soviet Union had in every factory, in every military unit, the person who's there to enforce the orthodoxy.
Yeah, and so here's what I want to all of that is very well said. And this is why I think in the grand scheme of things, look, I don't expect overnight for Instagram or Facebook or any of these other social media apps to become fair marketplace of ideas platforms. I just don't. But having one really changes the game. And so last night, the Daily Wire tweeted as followed: "It's the movie they really don't want you to see. Hashtag what is a woman. Watch the explosive documentary starring Matt Walsh free on Twitter for 24 hours." Okay. Immediately upon that occurring, I tried to share this, Buck. You couldn't comment. You couldn't share. Some of the left-wing, still remaining members of that orthodoxy tried to restrict the distribution. This morning, Elon Musk tweeted every parent should watch this with a link to the Daily Wire's movie. All right. And then he said, and by the way, when I read Elon's comments, I love it because he's so rational and reasonable. He said basically what we've said on this show for a long time. Consenting adults should do whatever makes them happy, provided it does not harm others. But a child is not capable of consent, which is why we have laws protecting minors. And Buck, as we are speaking right now to you, there are over 20 million views of this movie now. Now, a view obviously does not mean that everybody is watching this entire movie, but I do think this is something that if you're a parent and you've heard us talk about trans-related issues, but you really, let's be honest, haven't dove into them, I think it's important to recognize what they're doing and, scarily, what they are trying to convince your kids are normal. And remember, Buck, a while back, Mario Lopez, it might have been like 2 years ago, Slater from Saved by the Bell. Mario Lopez, a really good guy. I think he does Access Hollywood now. But for a lot of you, especially if you're around our age.
Were you a Saved by the Bell watcher?
Oh, yeah. I love Saved by the Bell.
Me too.
Love Saved by the Bell. So Slater from Saved by the Bell. So he is how many of you will know him. So he came out and said, and I'm paraphrasing, basically that he didn't think 6-year-olds should be able to pick their gender. And people lost their minds. And I remember having a conversation at that point in time with my wife, and you know, we've raised 3 boys, 15, 12, and 8 right now. And my wife was so fired up about this. She was like, we wouldn't let 6-year-olds pick their meals on a regular basis in this household. And I know a lot of you out there with kids and grandkids know what I mean, because kids aren't at 6 years old capable of making really good, decisions. But we're going to let a 6-year-old pick their gender and treat it as if it's.
Yeah. I mean, you and Laura went with that interesting tradition of raising your children with the gender assigned at birth. So,
I know.
Assigned at birth gender, Clay.
Neanderthals, basically, evidently. We had 3 boys, and when they had penises, when they came out, we decided they were boys. I mean, I know. And the doctor, by the way, made the crazy decision to be like, yep, it's a boy. So I know, but we may be basically, like I said, but draconian in that respect, but antebellum even. But that's what we did.
Well, if your doctor all of a sudden is walking around wearing a Kamala Biden 2024 T-shirt and calls you and says, I don't know, I might have gotten the gender wrong. I think we could just ignore the lunacy that's happening here. But that's why the What is a Woman documentary, I think, is so. They know what we think, right? I mean, they understand that people like you and me and our audience, our people, think that this stuff is crazy. But what they hate about the What is a Woman documentary is that for a very rare moment, some of the people who are supposed to be experts, the high priests of the gender religion, are forced to try to answer the most fundamental question, which is the title of the movie, and they are incapable of doing it. And so there's a humiliation of the ideology that comes from that. They know that you and I think it's crazy, but when their high priests look like buffoons, that's why they hate it so much.
This is also where I think the far left wing is most vulnerable. They like to believe that they are way smarter than everybody else. And when you can puncture and push through that smarmy, we're smarter than everybody else, and actually point out that there is no basis behind their gender ideology, and that when they're questioned on it just a little bit, the entire notion upon which they base their gender ideology collapses. That's where they start to get really uncomfortable. We've talked about this before, Buck, but I do think it's the soft underbelly of the left in this country. They can't handle criticism. And that's why they're constantly policing what can and cannot be said. Because if you start to ask the right questions, and if you just start to sort of have the antenna go up and you start to probe some of the arguments that they make, you realize there's no substance to it. And worse than that, you are then able to expose them as not being that smart. And that is what they cannot stand happening.
The most valuable premises of leftism, Democrat liberalism, a misnomer, but we can still call them liberals, I guess. The most valuable premises they have, the value premise they have for the people who are believers, all you have to do is agree with us that you use the pronouns that are preferred and that a man can become a woman and vice versa, and you are a better person and a smarter person than the people who disagree. That's the implicit value premise of going along with it. Without having to know anything, read anything, debate anything, you just adopt these positions and you sit at the cool kids table at lunch.